Today's lesson is topic 13, lesson 8, 13.8, comparing and ordering decimals. The objective for today is, I will use decimal place value to compare and order decimals. In your notes, you should have glued in the recording sheet for decimal place value. It is a table. I want you to put all of these decimals in the chart. No particular order right now, but include all of these decimals listed here, these three, in your notes. So I will start here. I don't have anything in the one. The black line on mine is where my decimal is, but you have a decimal on your chart. 6 and 7. 0, 6, 6, and 0.7. Okay, so I read them as 6,700, 6,600, and 7 tenths. Today we're focusing on how we can use these charts to determine which decimals are greater and which ones are the least. We always start with the greatest place value and compare there first. Starting in the greatest place value, they are all 0 in the 1, so then I move on to my next place value, which is the tenths. So I have to compare all decimals in the tenths. Based on that, I know that 7 tenths would be the greatest. So I'm going to put a 1 off to the side. You can include that next to the one that is the greatest on yours as well. 7 tenths would be the greatest because that is my next greatest place value. And 7 is greater than the 2 6s that are also in the tenths. I have to continue moving on to the hundredths to compare my last two. 7 is again greater than 6, so this one would be the second greatest, leaving my least to be 66 hundredths. These charts allow you to compare each place value to determine which number is the greatest and which one is the least. On the next one, I'm going to give you 3 numbers, and I want you to put them in order on the place value chart. So this time, don't just write them in a specific one, but write them in order, the least to greatest. Least being the first one you write down, and greatest being the last one you write down. Don't forget to compare each number starting with the greatest place value. So starting in your ones column, compare to put in your first one. Well, the first one for greatest, I'm sorry, I asked you to do it least to greatest, so you're trying to find the least first. Well, 1 is less than 2, so my least has to be 1 and 4800. Now I move to my next place value. I'm in the tenths place. 4 is less than 5, so therefore the second least would be 2 and 4800, leaving the greatest to be 2 and 5 tenths. Be sure to include this in your notes. Compare the greatest place value first. What is the order of numbers from greatest to least? This time we're comparing all 3 of these from greatest to least. You do not have another spot on your table to write them. But just looking at each place value, I have a 0 in the ones for each time. So I must go over to the next column, which would be my tenths place. Compare my tenths place. While I have 2 that both have a 1, this one would be the least. So I know that that's going to be the least because there's nothing in the tenths place, so that has to be the least. So I need to figure out which one is the greatest, because this time it says to write it in order from greatest to least. It's always very important to double check the question to determine which way it wants you to write them. Well, I move to the hundredths place. 1 is greater than 0, therefore my greatest one listed would be 11 hundredths, leaving 10 hundredths to be the second greatest or the second least.